Now we move to a different session called Solving the Productivity Puzzle, How to Create People Performance, Engagement and Innovation. This is presented to you by Tim Ringo, Chartered FCIPD Managing Director of timringo.com Advisory. Tim Ringo is an award-winning author, speaker, and executive board advisor on topics related to HR and human capital. His latest book is Solving the Productivity Puzzle, published August 2020 on Kogan Page. He is the former senior executive in SAP, IBM, and Accenture. Over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sneha. So I'll just get the technology going here. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen in just a moment. So welcome everybody to still wintry and still locked down London. Hopefully by next month we finally get out of lockdown, but I'm very pleased to be with you all today. I wish it could be in person, but we all know that's not quite possible yet. So solving the productivity puzzle, how people engagement, innovation, and performance will transform work. So what are we going to cover today? So don't have a huge amount of time. We're going to talk about post-pandemic trends that you need to know about and take advantage of now. This is a crisis you should be taking advantage of in the workplace. But we need to look at what's causing productivity decline, and do we even have it productivity defined properly in the 21st century? But I'm going to mainly focus on solutions today to give you real practical things that you can do to fix this, and things that I found in my research. As Microsoft CEO famously said, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. So it's unprecedented time. So let's take advantage. Everything you're going to see today is from my most recent book, which came out just the end of 2020, Solving the Productivity Puzzle, recently shortlisted for Business Book of the Year. So let's get started. So these are the sort of 8 things that I think you should be keeping an eye on and potentially looking to take advantage of in your organization in the coming year. First of all, very much like the 2008 crisis, it was the CFO who had to step up. It was a physical crisis. This time it's a people crisis. It's about keeping people safe, well, working. So this has been the opportunity for HR to step up. It's a rare opportunity for them, and they've done that. Talking to senior executives all around the world, HR organizations have really stepped up and helped keep organizations productive, engaged, and safe. So this is kind of the sweet spot for them. And I think you're going to continue to see that going forward with HR at the center. We've all seen plenty of press around home working and, what's the future of that. But I think more importantly, what we're going to see in the future is flexible working. I do think that once offices can reopen, people are going to be really, keen to get back into the office. But they're still going to want to reserve that time, maybe a day or 2 a week where they work from home, they work flexibly. And I think this is going to be really important going forward, that you start planning for this, because more and more data is coming in the past few months that shows that people's productivity has actually gone up in the latter half of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's been because of this flexible working, this ability to mix your personal life in and be able to work from home and not commute as much. So I think you're going to need to prepare for not so much about home working, but flexible working going forward, both in terms of how, when, and how much time people spend at work. Also, workplace culture, I think, is going to change dramatically. And I think we're going to see the death of what's called presenteeism. And we've all seen this, where people stay in the office because the boss is there, and sometimes stay there till late at night because people feel pressure to do that. Well, this has kind of broken that cycle where people are working from home. They're not in front of the boss all the time, not in front of the manager. And what's interesting is data showing that managers have become a lot more comfortable with just letting people get on with work. They're feeling comfortable because people are producing the outcomes. Again, data is showing that senior executives are very impressed at the moment with how much people have been able to get done over the past year. I think this idea of more high EQ managers is going to come to the fore. Managers who are more relaxed about letting people get on with work and looking after people from that perspective. Workforce well-being, it was already a trend before COVID-19. There was a doubling of investment in Europe in the kind of well-being subject, which we'll talk a little bit more later. But it's not optional anymore. It's going to become a real focus, a centerpiece of organizations to show workers that they can keep them safe, both in terms of disease, but other things, right? So I think we're going to see workforce well-being become a very important part, which means people's physical well-being, their mental well-being, but also their financial well-being is going to become a subject going forward. So this is another opportunity to show the workforce that that you can help them. Workplace diversity, again, another trend that was already on the way before COVID-19. But I think we're finding that using technology to work has really democratized work. It's kind of created this situation where, gender, race, sexual orientation disabilities, well, they're not visible so much at the moment. And it's allowed organizations, I think, to rethink that whole idea of workplace diversity. And my experience shows that the most diverse workforces are the most engaged and the most productive. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in detail in a moment as well. So workplace diversity is something that's going to accelerate in 2021-22. Employee experience. So you've heard a lot about user interface for PCs and that sort of thing, but really what things have moved on to is looking at the whole employee experience, from the time they're recruited all the way through to the end of their career. And it's really important that technology is moving into this kind of idea of human-centric, right? So it's not about the PC, software developer anymore. It's about the human using the technology. And you see a lot of senior executives saying we need to have a digital workplace that looks like the digital home, right? And this is becoming a thing at the moment. From big data to smart data. So particularly in HR, if you have big data, you have nothing. What you want is smart data, very targeted data that helps you get the right people in the right place at the right time. That is smart data. And that's tiny bits of information that you can use and you can action upon. And that's what's really important. Big data is not a good thing. Smart data is. Lastly, and what we're going to spend time on here, solving the productivity puzzle. So productivity has been in decline for nearly 10 years now. And we're seeing this in every region of the world and virtually every industry where productivity is either stagnating or has been going down. It's the longest period of stagnating or declining people productivity in recorded economic history. So it's a real problem. And I'm going to explain to you what's happening there and what you can do to fix it and how you can use the crisis to hopefully change some things that you might not ordinarily have done. So let's have a look. So the OECD, which is the world's economic body, they calculate GDP, which is a very important number, right? Gross domestic product. And what they're predicting is that over the next sort of 40 to 50 years, is that the average annual rate of GDP growth is going to slow and start to go down. And they place this almost entirely on people productivity. Basically, they're saying that people productivity is going to continue to stagnate and decline because organizations are, one, they're not investing to align people to new technology. Two, they're not changing their processes. They're not digitizing their processes enough. And three, they're not changing their organization structures from hierarchical to more flat organizations. And so because of these three things, they're predicting that this is going to continue to create downward pressure on people productivity and GDP. Now, I call that the pessimist view in my book, because I actually think the OECD are missing a lot of things they're not seeing. I actually think there's a very positive picture out there, and let me outline that for you in a moment. So the good news is that the World Economic Forum found in January that 80% of organizations are actually starting to focus on these problems. So accelerating plans to digitize their processes, accelerating plans to change their organization structures to allow more flexible working. So two of the three issues, in fact, you could argue three of the three are actually starting to be addressed by the vast majority of organizations. So this, I think, is the opportunity, which gets to sort of what the optimist view is, which is my view, which says, yes, of course, technology over the past 5, 6, 7 years has overwhelmed us. We haven't done a good job inside of organizations in terms of helping people align to technology, explaining to people how the technology is going to make them better. But we're kind of through that curve now. And I think organizations are focused on fixing those things. And a lot of data is starting to come in during the pandemic that shows that we're starting an upward trend on people productivity, which is really surprising given the global nature of work over the past year. But we're starting to see a rapid upward trend in people productivity. So The Economist did an article in January that said, 5 reasons to be positive about people productivity. You should definitely have a look at that. And it talks about how the pandemic is probably helping to fix this problem. And I totally agree. And I think the OECD is probably going to revisit some of their predictions based on this. So I'm in the optimist camp, and let me help you hopefully get into the optimist camp as well. Let's have a look. So it's absolutely true that technology is racing ahead of us. So since the industrial age, which this graph pictures, so 1780s, we've seen just human technology progress has taken off in an exponential manner, everything from the steam engine through to now artificial intelligence. And it's true, throughout time, people have been overwhelmed by that technology, then they've caught up with the technology and then overwhelmed again. Well, we just finished a period where people have been overwhelmed by that technology. But now that there's going to be more investment in aligning people to that technology, I think we're going to see the curve of people alignment to technology alignment get closer, which means we're going to start to see the benefits of that, I think, in the very near future, which is the reason why some economists are saying we're going to see a J curve here very soon in terms of people productivity. So absolutely correct. We have had a problem in the recent past. But there's another problem that I uncovered in my research, which is that work still looks like 1992. So if you go back 20, 30 years, it hasn't really changed. It's still a PC with a keyboard with a mouse and a desk and maybe a printer over here to the side. It's not that different. And that's a real issue, because at home, it's almost like the Jetsons, which was a 1960s kids cartoon, was about this futuristic family that had all these gadgets that helped them at home. Well, we're in the Jetsons age now. At home, we are highly productive. Data shows we're much more productive in our social lives because of all the consumer grade technology we have. We talk to our devices, we touch our devices. Our devices are on all the time. They do stuff for us and we don't even know it. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of executives start to say they want the technology at work to be like the technology at home. They want to have the same sort of technology that you have at home at work, where you may be talking to your digital assistant to help you with things like approve vacation or holiday or to book learning courses for people. You're going to see that coming. A lot of the new HR technology is very based on chatbots and talking to it. So it's going to become much more performance support like we have at home. So this is going to be really important going to the future. And I think now that people have been working at home for so long, they're going to start to demand that the technology at work looks like what they have at home. And this will go a long way, I think, to helping fix the productivity puzzle. Another thing I found in my research is you can't just throw more people at this. You can't throw more hours and more people at it. In fact, McKinsey's, Deloitte, a number of people have done studies in the past few years to show the more people and the more hours you throw at the productivity problem, you actually make it worse. In fact, more and more data is coming in that says the ideal work week for a human is 34 hours. And this is why you're starting to see a lot of organizations are experimenting with 4-day weeks, even 3-day weeks. And the data that's coming in is fascinating. It shows tremendous uplifts in productivity when you reduce the number of days that people are at work. And it seems counterintuitive, but if you think about it, and my wife works 4 days a week, and it just creates an incredible focus on those 4 days, and you just get things done. 5 days, we seem to just be filling up the week with things to do. When you get 4 days, 3 days, people become a lot more focused. So you can't throw more people at it. You can't throw more hours to fix it. So those baby boomers like me, they're out there. You can't just say to people, work harder. It makes the problem worse. So we have to work smarter. So what does that look like? Well, I think the first thing is we have to redefine how productivity is defined. So productivity, when I went to look it up before I wrote the book, I thought, right, I better at least understand the definition, because I hadn't really seen it since I was in business school some 30 years ago. But here it is. It's the various measures of efficiency of production. A productivity measure is expressed as the ratio of output to inputs used in a production process. So let me summarize that for you. That is people as machines producing widgets, right? And that is not what the 21st century looks like. That's what the 18th and 19th century looked like. People in factories, people picking fruit and on farms. That's not how people work today. 80% of people work in some sort of office-based environment. So we need to rethink the definition. So in the book, I came up with a new definition, which I think is more three-dimensional and more 21st century. And it's essentially the following: getting stuff done that measurably improves the economic and human interests of organizations and society at large. So this is no longer just about people producing widgets. It's about how do we measure the economics of the organization, that align them with the human interest, but also align them with society. And when we're doing that, we're doing those three things and we've got them in line. Guess what? We get more productivity than we could have ever imagined. Because one, we're working in a different environment. Two, we're measuring productivity properly. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail what I mean by that. So in the book, I break it down into three things, which says, look, value, the fiscal side is always going to be there. I mean, even in communist countries, they're now capitalists, right? And it's important to measure the fiscal side of productivity. But that's kind of where things stopped in the past. I'm saying there's some other aspects. So the second aspect is creating a workplace that's purpose-driven and gives opportunities for the employee to flourish, right? Right people, right place, right time. And that creates engagement. People engage with the work. They want to work. They want the organization to succeed. And guess what? People who are engaged in work become more innovative. They think up of new products, services. They think of better ways to do things. And guess what? You get this kind of virtuous cycle. When you have an engaged workforce, you get innovation. And guess what? You get more value. And you create this sort of flywheel of success. And when you're looking at productivity in this kind of three-dimensional world, you get a very different kind of a view of things. And so let's see, how do you actually put this into work in your organization? Well, really simply, I came up with a quote unquote equation, which essentially is right people, right skills, right place, right time, and very importantly, right motivation. So organizations, I have found in my research and those that I've worked with over my career that do this really, really well, not surprisingly, have a very engaged workforce. They have a highly productive workforce, and guess what? They're higher performing, and they're very innovative organizations. And this is what I call PEIP, people engagement, innovation, and performance. So this approach, this kind of mindset first, processes second, and then technology third, which helps to achieve this situation, creates an organization that's very, very engaged, very, very productive, high performing. And guess what? When you take this and you multiply this approach by emerging technology, AI, machine learning, those sorts of things, I think you're gonna turbocharge productivity for the future. And I think we're going to create historic people productivity by augmenting, not replacing, but augmenting people with smart technology in a situation where you have the right people, right skills, right place, right time, right motivation. This is what solves the problem. And this isn't theoretical. Throughout the book, I go through a number of case studies of organizations that do this and do it really well. And this is a key as to why they're high performing. So to get the economy back on our feet, we're going to have to create this approach to PEIP. And again, this is what I think the OECD have been missing. However, I think one thing they do have right, they define an innovative organization in this way. And I think this is a really good definition. If you're wondering, well, what does an innovative and productive organization look like? Well, they're organizations that continue to implement new or significantly improve product, process, marketing, organizational methods, right? So they're talking about the three things that need to get fixed to fix people productivity, right? So that's what the organization looks like. But they go on to describe, what does the workforce culture look like if you're in that kind of organization? Well, not surprisingly, people are encouraged to tackle problems and issues from a new angle and in new ways. And also, not a surprise, they're supported in doing that. They're not punished for taking risk. The whole idea of benefit is taking a certain amount of risk, right? And so employees that are supported doing that, no surprise, are more productive. And then you create these organizations where you create that flexibility, that ability to adapt to these changes, the things that people come up with. You create this situation where people are, much more open to trying new things, and then the organization is open to trying those new things. So, I mean, who doesn't want to work in an organization like that, right? And that's part of PEIP, right people, right skills, right place, right time, right motivation, right? That's what this looks like. That is what, and I found in my research, organizations that look and feel like this they've solved the productivity puzzle. So it's possible to do. So let me end by just giving you a few things that I think you can do, some really practical things to think about. And I think a lot of them are accelerated by our current situation with the COVID-19 crisis. So continue to embrace and accelerate those digital transformation and automation programs. So as I said at the top, 80% of organizations are looking to do that, looking to change, right? So redesign the organization, redesign those processes, focus on the human experience at work, and overall democratize work, get a diverse workforce together and getting them working together. The next is refocus your performance management, your performance measures on people's outcomes, not their time at work or their outputs, right? Focus on the outcomes, right? Personal autonomy goes a long way to creating engagement and productivity. So let people choose when and how and where to work. Let them figure these things out. And it's so much easier to link outcomes to business outcomes, right? So you can measure that a lot better and know where you're working and where things aren't working, right? And then lastly, rethink work hours. Okay, I think one thing we've seen is that people are spending too much time on Zoom. And I think it's really important to think about sort of your workforce's best time for working. Recent studies are showing that the majority of people are the most focused between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. I always used to do, before I retired, have my team meetings in that kind of time space. And I always took into account time zones as well, and found that those are the most productive team meetings, and really just let people get on with their work for the rest of the day. So you might want to think about taking this opportunity to be flexible and restructure when and how work is done. And then lastly, I think it's going to be really important that workplaces be very focused on hygiene and those sorts of things going forward, right? It isn't something we do just for now. We want to eliminate sick days going forward, so do this at the moment. So be flexible, transparent in your change programs, but keep in mind this last thing: not everyone is on the same page. This is from PwC in November 2020. CHROs are all excited about the new world and ready to invest significant amounts of money in these new ways of working. But guess what? CFOs aren't. So you have to make the case for these changes. And that's a big part of solving the productivity puzzle. And I talk about it in the book. How do you make a business case? How do you make a roadmap for change? Really, really important. You can't just say, hey, we have new ideas. You've got to be able to justify them with a business case and a roadmap for change. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. And here's my contact details if you ever want to get in contact with me. So thank you very much, Sneha.